These are freaking sweet! Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 hilarious Peter Griffin moments.
Butt scratcher! Butt scratcher!
Okay, but seriously though, yeah. Okay, a few warnings about this video. One, you'll be seeing a lot of black screens because because a lot of the time I didn't actually put in footage from the film. I really only did it when I felt like I was obligated to, despite this being a review. Something else that I should also mention is that I've done a majority of the audio in a single take. But other than that, yeah, let's get into the 30-minute review from me about The Last Guest. So yeah. Okay, hello. So yeah, I'm doing yet another genre video that probably not gonna do again, but basically everything I do on this channel is for the sake of fun anyway, so I might as well. So well, yeah, The Last Guest is a Roblox movie. I mean, it's feature like that it's presented as a movie, but I can't really see it as one. Like, I can appreciate all the effort that went into it, but yeah, to be honest, I can't really see it as one, especially when it was divided into 4 parts before being compiled into the one thing. So what are my thoughts on The Last Guest? Well, before I get to my thoughts, I need to go over the story, of course. So why don't we look over the plot? For this review, by the way, I will be looking at the full compiled movie, which has some clips that weren't in the original 4 parts when they were divided. So, if you want, what I would say is the definitive Last Guest experience, I suppose, then you should watch the compiled version. I mean, that's why it was made after all. So, the movie begins with our two main protagonists in an active war zone, and our secondary protagonist, whose name we haven't learned yet, is well, he's not shot dead, but we're supposed to assume that he's been shot dead, as his friend is mourning him. It then cuts to a flashback of the main protagonist, who we will just refer to as Guest, because that's how they refer to him, and the only time the actual character's full name is said in the entire thing, I'm pretty sure, is in the second part, when he's referred to as Guest 1337, but Guest is shorter and simpler to say anyway, so we'll just go with that. So there's a scene of Guest fishing with his father, and he asks him why guests are starting to disappear. And this is, like, actual, like, setup. I will say, with all honesty, that this is an improvement over the original, where guests dying out as the young typical Roblox sad story bully says that, guests are dying out, and we're just supposed to get with it. Like, we aren't really told that guests are disappearing. So, even though it's not, like, miles better by any means, that's not the point. The point is that we at least, somewhat know that, guests are disappearing, and we don't need to know that from a comment made by typical Roblox bully 101, who appears in every single sad story. But then Bacon comes, and Uncle Ben's both of Guest's parents, and then the dad dies. Then afterwards, Guest ends up at an orphanage where he meets love interest, Then, after that, more typical Roblox bullies come up and murder her violently. Guest, of course, being the brave soul he is, decides to stand up to the bullies and dies. But then, suddenly, after Matt beats the bully to death, all three of them become the bestest of friends. In a montage, of course, because it wouldn't be a movie without a montage of friendship. But then, all of a sudden, the leader of the terrorist organisation comes to the orphanage in a fake-out scene, and then he just kind of leaves. Insert foreshadowing and yet another montage later, and we land at Guest wanting to be in the military, because he is the one last guest in Roblox. He probably acknowledged this, but, and by he I mean Oblivious probably acknowledged this while making the project, but he probably didn't actually show it because, it wouldn't be relevant to the story. But given that he's like the last guest in all of Roblox, wouldn't he technically be somewhat a celebrity and a massive target? Like, it wouldn't be that hard to find given that he just lives in this house. But then after he enlists in the military and says goodbye to his family, we get ethnic cleansing. That's a joke, it's a joke, I don't support that. So we get to the climax of the film after the typical bullies from earlier are just killed again for the second time. And there's also yet another montage in between as well, so that's, 3 now? Long story short, things go wrong, inspirational speech, he kills most of them and then gets shot in the leg. So then there's a giant explosion because he throws the grenade and there's a large tub of oil, and then we are supposed to assume that he dies. So what does Rattie the Fatty have to say about the first part of The Last Guest? It's fine. It's not awful, but it's not good either. I mean, some parts it's kind of hard to take seriously, and it's not ironically funny most of the time, but I'd say it's decent. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give the first part of The Last Guest a solid... Well, there is ironic entertainment to be had from it, but if I want to go by how good it is on its own unironically, then I'll probably give The Last Guest a 4.5. Even if that does seem a little bit harsh, I can at least still appreciate that there was effort put into it, which is obviously why people liked it so much. So, the part 2, I suppose, I mean, it's kind of it's a mid-quel, I'd say, because most of it takes place before, but the finale of the movie takes place during it, so I'll just call it a mid-quel. The mid-quel to The Last Guest starts with this little gremlin right here having drawn and then getting hit with some weird neck rotations thrown in there. Then after getting hit, he goes to the Jade Palace to train with Shifu to get the Dragon Scroll. Sorry, wrong movie. Then after we meet Best Friend, they rescue a dog. Then the parent dies, like in the last movie, except it's only one this time. And then we hear the general say that, oh, whoever wins this will get to stand by my side at the guest games. After an mass murder montage, we see Jez, that's his name, stand by the general at the guest games. Before we see that though, we see the two antagonists looking at the computer, trying to find the last guests remaining in Roblox. And just when you think that we see the guest games, no, we see the best friend character go down to the camp where the guests are doing some epic Minecraft speedruns. So after the Jez finds out that the best friend is not in fact a racist, he goes to tell the ruthless dictators about this. but he can't because he sees the same knife in the desk that killed his mother. Ooh! So he makes his way to the guest games, another mass murder montage later, and we get some introspection from our main character, about how, this is kind of just petty slaughtering for the sake of petty slaughtering, So after this movie's montage of friendship with this character, the best friend is killed because they tried to break the guests out the camp, but they don't succeed, and Jez gets sent in instead. After some more sad mementos, we get what I assume is another love interest. So after that, he's brought back out and brought back into the final battle from the first last guest. I wonder if they're gonna meet. Yeah, no, but the colonel spills the beans that he killed his mum. By he, I mean the general, by the way, not the colonel. And then he jumps in and saves the last guest from the grenade explosion. And given the events that take place in the movie, I'll also count the beginning of The Last Guest 3 as well. Not much really happens here. All we know is that most of the army was destroyed, and I think it's a lieutenant, a commander, whatever, goes down with a soldier to see if the last guest is alive. They find Matt and he gets killed, and then a very, very suspenseful chase scene happens. And afterwards we get villain death, and after that we get a he's alive scene. Wow. So what do I think of The Last Guest Part 2, The Prodigy? Well, it certainly had more to it. Because I definitely think that in terms of world building, at least, and what we're showing, I think it does a much better job. Because even though I don't feel for any of these characters at all, if I'm honest, but I feel like this one does a much better job at trying to do that, especially when doing it from the perspective of someone under the opposing regime. So I'd give it probably a 7 out of 10. That doesn't seem like much, but it is probably better than the first, so yeah, 7 out of 10. Something else that I feel like is a lot better in this as well is probably the music. Like, for example, when we see the guests in the camp, I really like the music used there, like how it gets, I don't really care for the moment overall, but the music definitely makes it feel like it's more disturbing than it actually is. Well, no, it's the way that I put that does not make sense, but you get what I'm trying to mean here. The Last Guest 3 will probably be quicker than the other two movies, because other than the ending, from what I recall, not much really happens. Because at the beginning, Matt gets taken back in by the military and such, but yeah, for the rest of it, all that happens really is that Jez and Guest meet. They give Guest exposition really on what's happening, so they understand each other, things like that. But yeah, not much really happens in this compared to the other two. So after Guest has an interaction with Jez and the Doctor, I don't think they actually ever say his name. Like, I know they said that the best friend's name was Zara. I learned her name. But yeah, after that they hide in a basement or bunker of some sort, under this building that the Doctor's in. I'll just call it a medical office, and the colonel comes in and just starts like threatening him, like, oh, I'll bury you next to your daughter if I find out that you're helping them, and then he just leaves. I feel like he would probably come there more than one time, so I don't think it's a good idea to immediately after he leaves to open the door to your basement and tell the two people in it, hey, I'm going to bring you food. Because even though, yes, you might be quiet, he could potentially hear you, or he could just come back in like, oh, I forgot my glasses or something. So obviously that didn't happen, but it's something that I think you should at least be aware of, I think. Then we go to a scene of Matt and Matt love interest. Kind of, they don't really imply that they're in love or anything, but they had a child sometime after the Great War in the Last Guest Part 4, so I'm just gonna call her by that. I completely forgot what they were talking about, but given a part of the conversation that I remember, and the film that it's in, I'm gonna assume that they're talking about, could Guest still be alive? I don't know. Ooh, and such. Then Guest and Jez decide that they want to break all of the guests out the camp, and you gotta help us. So after they kill Flamingo, they decide to talk to Rose again, who we get the backstory of, and we can see that the the news of guests disappearing in Roblox, or family didn't take it too well. We also see the Bacon General on the TV because he exists. We needed to remind you, because the Colonel is the main villain now. The Bacon General did in fact exist, but that's besides the point. The point is that they need to move away, and there's a scene where she breaks the family portrait in anger, leading to some more foreshadowing right here. Then, many years later, when they're at a farm, Bacon Soldier comes in, and he's all like, and then the dad's all like, but then he gets shot. Yeah, he's dead. And then Rose and her mother get sent to I mean the camp. So we get yet another MMM, the mass murder montage. So they can break into the guest games and get all of the guests out. Yippee! But it's a trap. Turns out Rose actually betrayed them all along. Psh, plot twist. Plot twist. We then get the reveal that the elite guard was actually waiting at the memorial for Guest, so he could capture the wife and kid of Guest, so that he could fight Jez in the Guest games. Now, I will admit here that even though I did find it kind of stupid, that I found it kind of stupid that the Bacons were guarding something, even though it was meant to be a trap. Like, I get that they would have noticed that there was no one there, but given that Rose was already feeding them false information, she could have just easily gave a reason for that. So, I will say though, even though I'm not the biggest fan of this twist, the one thing I do like about it is that I didn't see it coming. First time watching back when I was a little 11-year-old gremlin. This surprised me. I will admit that this did surprise me. So it's not entirely out of left field either, because you definitely feel like the pieces were there already, and it fits the story. So even though I feel like it could have been handled better, I do feel like it was handled decently, and it was an organic plot twist that feels like it was always in the story from the start, to be honest. So, at the end of the Last Guest 3, we get set up for the fourth and final part. Uh, like I said, when we see the ending of the Last Guest 1, that we now know that the elite guard will be trying to capture uh, the wife and kid of the last guest, and most likely kill Matt along with them. So, what did I think of this individual part of the last guest, you may be asking? Well, this one was probably the hardest to decide on, because when I first was preparing to watch the whole thing, because I hadn't watched it in a long time, uh, I thought I was gonna like this one least, because from what I remembered anyway, basically nothing happened. And I do still agree that compared to the other movies, not that much happened in comparison, because it was mostly just it didn't really feel like its own. It really didn't feel like its own section. It really only felt like a way to bridge part two and four together, which which the thing is as well is that part three and part four were originally supposed to be the same part, because originally it was only going to be a trilogy. It was going to be the Last Guest Part One, the Last Guest Part Two, the Prodigy, and the Last Guest Part Three, the Great War. But that just didn't happen. It was four. So I will say though, for what it was fine. Uh, I'm gonna say that even though it definitely is objectively better than the Last Guest one. The thing is that this is a bit of a slog compared to the Last Guest one. So I will give this movie a 6 out of 10 for this review. Post production right here, I meant film, not movie. And so we get to the Last Guest 4, the climax, the final battle, the end of this quadrilogy. Will it deliver? Well, let's find out. From what I've seen of the popular opinion, I'll say before I get to the actual review, is that this seems to be the one that people like the most, because it's the happy ending, it's the ending of the quadrilogy. So it's a good thing that I'm making this about 3 years later, because at the time when this was like a recent when it was a recent release, people who saw that some people didn't like it, particularly the video by a user on YouTube called Woven Razor, Woven Razor. So I don't know. I don't know how you pronounce his name. Um, but people didn't like it very much when he made a somewhat ironic video on everything wrong with the Last Guest 4, which you can probably imagine didn't go over too well when people, found the video.
That takes a bullet for someone because they feel they're obligated to, because they've done so many bad things throughout the stories.
That's
so
true.
By taking the bullet, that completely makes their point justifiable. Cliche.
No, it's not a cliche. It's how she actually feels. Does he not understand how movie plots work?
And the princess!
That doesn't make sense, guys. If this series was pointless, then why does it altogether have over 10 million views? This guy's such a hater. No wonder this video has so many dislikes,
You serious?
Okay, back on track with the actual review though. We start where we left off with the last guest's wife and kid with Matt at the memorial. But of course, they decide to go to the hospital after looking back in some childhood memories, because He's like just a little bit injured, just bandages wrapped around it to the extent where it looks like a marshmallow. They meet Molly and the new captain, and Molly is now the new lieutenant. So I was clearly wrong about the guy who gets stabbed being the lieutenant, but I'm not going to go back and edit that in post because it's quite funny that I mixed them up. So after going to the doctor to see how his leg's getting on, a fight scene ensues between Matt and the elite guard of the colonel, with Molly intervening with a gun, and he runs off. Then we cut back to our main characters, where after Jez basically goes, "Grr, I'm angry at you because you betrayed me," we get the reason why Rose did what she did, because her mother was being tortured by the Bacon terrorists. So after we get that, Jez says that Guest will have to kill him in the Guest games. Otherwise, yeah, I don't really remember what I don't really remember what he said. It was something along the lines of, "There's no other way." I'm assuming. I'm assuming he was referring to the wife and kid, because it would be easy to assume that the elite guard would have captured them by now because he didn't know Matt was there. After he says that, the good old Doc comes in and injects both of the guards with, or no, not both, there's three of them, but he comes in, injects all the guards with heroin, and then allows, Rose, Jez, and Guest to escape. So they hide back in the basement bunker under the medical office, and then they hear the sirens, which will allow them to break out the Guests because the prisons will only be lightly guarded. And Guests all like,
"Yeah, let's do this!"
afterwards they escape the Bacon territory in general. They kill the gate guards at the gate. Yeah, guards at the gate. They kill the guards at the gate, and then some other bacon hairs come out and are like, "Oh no, we want to stop the Empire too, because we can't do this anymore." One of them including the teacher who taught them bacon propaganda in the second part, which I found to be a little bit stupid, but okay, I'll roll with it. So then we get a scene of Matt and Molly talking, and clearly, Matt's dialogue was written by Butch Hartman.
I hope the captain hasn't overestimated how easy it will be to defeat the Bacon army.
What could possibly go wrong? So we get to the final battle scene, and at first it seems like, "Oh no, the good guys are outnumbered." But then Guest and Jez are all like,
Oh, yeah? I think my scary, otherworldly, shadowy spirit friends might have something to say about that.
So then we start the climax, which I'm gonna admit, the start of it's really stupid. Like, most of them are just running with guns, shooting at each other, and no one's falling. Given how many people are on the battlefield in the first place, and given how many of them have guns that are currently firing, there should be more people dropping than we see. In fact, people should be dropping like flies. The majority of them would already be dead before they even get to the other. Side of the battlefield.
Really quickly, the movie is called The Last Guest Part 4, The Great War. If it was just a huge massacre on the screen, A, it wouldn't be that kid family friendly, and B, it wouldn't be that big of a great war. It would just be like a massacre. Would it be The Great Massacre? Part 4, The Great Massacre? No, it's The Great War. There's a huge battle for the Great War. What the, man? I don't understand it.
Yeah, you're saying this about the same movie series that had a captain get shish kebabbed, essentially. Never mind the fact that, again, it doesn't make logic. It doesn't make sense from a logical standpoint either, and also, I don't think you know this, but an awful lot of people who fight in wars get killed. So yeah, wars essentially are massacres. If you would really just step back to think about that. Then have fighting messier than then have a fight messier than two overpowered Minecraft mobs going against each other in one of the popular MMO's videos, and then we get to a scene where Rose sacrifices herself. and then Guest and Jez are all like. And then we get probably one of the better parts of the climax, where it's just Guest and Jez versus the Colonel, who's constantly trying to get his gun, and if he gets it and reloads it, then it's game over. But yeah, it's quite a decent climax overall, I'd say. Colonel is an absolute menace, and he puts up a pretty good fight. And I do like how when he shot mirrored Zara's death. I thought that was a nice callback, even though it was really the only way I could see them killing him in a satisfactory way anyway. And after a scene of Rose in the hospital, which just basically hammers home the message that, oh, the war's over and such, we get this we get the scene which, in my opinion, even though there's plenty of good and watchable scenes in this quadrilogy, this is the only one which would I actually say is great or even amazing. Well, it's not necessarily a scene, I don't think. It's more like a sequence, but just watch. The reason why, in my opinion, this scene is so good is because the part where Guest comes into his house with no sound whatsoever, just regularly walking to see his family minding their business outside without even knowing that he'd entered. The silence and it gives me a chill because it legitimately feels like someone coming home from war or some other traumatic experience. As dumb as that sounds to say about a Roblox movie. So, despite having probably the best overall climax, and having what is easily the best scene in the whole film, I think that The Last Guest 4 was probably the weakest of them, in my opinion, because going into this, I thought that the movie with the most happening would be The Last Guest 4, and the movie with the least happening would be the third. And yeah, I was wrong. I was very, very, very wrong. The soundtrack is good as always, though. It's probably at its best in this movie, especially in the final scene as well, and during the climax. Those are both very good tracks. But yeah, overall, even though I thought it was bad, it was probably one of, if not the best way to conclude things, based on the direction that the story could go. So, so as an individual movie, as an individual film, sorry, I would probably give The Last Guest probably a 4.5, 4.5 out of 10. But as a conclusion, I'd probably give it a 6 or a 7. And that brings me to another thing. What do I think of The Last Guest overall as one combined film? It's meh. Like, there's obviously a lot to enjoy. You can tell that talent went into it. But there's the smaller stuff just builds up. So it's to the extent where I can't really say it's definitely not bad, far from it, but it's, in my opinion, not good by any means either. but I still appreciate the amount of effort that went into it, because it took about a year for parts 1 to 4 to be complete, and I don't want to just come off as grr this bad. So yeah, that's what I'll be rating. I'll be rating The Last Guest overall as a 6 out of 10 quadrilogy. And for the love of God, don't just leave mean comments on Slightly the Stack Man being like, he don't like The Last Guest, or something like that, just because I said some very mean things about a Roblox movie. I beg you. We come to the end of our journey. I've been Rattie the Fatty, and I've wasted about 33 or so minutes of your time. I don't know how long this has been recording for. So, yeah. I'll see you in my next video, which will probably either be something relating to Slightly the Stickman or a shitpost. It doesn't really matter though. I will see you around. Goodbye.